Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping middle managers and their supervisors embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm Josh Hugo, one of your co-hosts, and I'm very excited to be here today with my good friend and co-host, John Clark. John, good morning.
Hey man, how's it going? I'm glad we got the flannel memo, as our guest noted when he got on, and also excited that I have a full beard, but I do not have the fullest beard on here today, so that's really exciting. But excited for today's episode. How are you doing? How's the week been for you?
It's been good. It's been good. It's been a full week,
Yeah.
unlike your beard.
My beard is full. Very
Well,
full.
maybe mine is the least full.
It's the least full.
For
sure.
our YouTube watchers, you'll see I'm number 3 out of 3 on this group. But
You keep it close to it. You keep it close.
yeah, I'm doing well today. You know, go behind the fourth wall for a minute. This is a lot of attempts. We're having some audio issues on our podcast today, so I'm going to have to separate my frustration about that from really excited to introduce our guest today. Our guest today is Andrew Robinson. Andrew is somebody I was connected with through the work that we both were doing at one point through a consulting group called Giant. And Andrew also had led a really excellent podcast around business development, knowing yourself to lead yourself. And it's called Guidelines. And I really enjoyed listening to that for a number of months. And through our shared space, reached out to Andrew. Andrew was gracious enough to come onto our show today and share more about his work, some exciting new updates in his world. Andrew Robinson designs systems, strategies, and content that disrupts how organizations develop their people. For almost actually 20 years, Andrew has built frameworks and methodologies adopted by executives at Nike, Microsoft, Novo Nordisk, and leaders across professional sports, healthcare, retail, and hospitality. His work is grounded in a conviction that profitability should serve people, the employees, customers, stakeholders, not the reverse. As a keynote speaker, author, and podcaster, Andrew challenges conventional approaches to leadership development. He architects scalable systems that transform how organizations develop people, systems that cultivate leader engagement and retention, deepen customer loyalty, and generate profit through activation rather than extraction. His frameworks combine intellectual rigor with practical application, creating sustainable infrastructure for organizational development rather than dependency on ongoing intervention. Andrew earned his graduate degree in organizational systems from the University of Oregon in Eugene, graduating with top honors. We also encourage you to check out Andrew's work at andrewfrobinson.com and his excellent writing on Substack at andrewfrobinson.substack.com. So now that you are glowing with all of this introduction and bio, Andrew, it's awesome to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here. I'm been looking forward to this conversation. So
Yeah. Awesome to have you, Andrew. It's good to meet you too. I'm so excited for this today. I've been catching up on your work this week, so excited to jump in on it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Speaking of your work, you're launching something new this week, or the week that our listeners are first hearing this, next week as we're recording it. Tell us about what's going on. I'm pretty excited to hear this.
Yeah, you bet. No, I mean, it dawned on me a couple weeks ago that I'm entering my 20th year of doing this work. So I started in 2006, and that's given me the opportunity to have a lot of observations over the various capacities that I've worked in. And one of the greatest frustrations that I have had throughout my career is watching companies, well-meaning leaders who want to see their people grow, not be able to have something that is sustainable. So what you end up seeing is a cycle of bringing in a program, bringing in a consultant like me or you guys, and there's no question about the value. The question is about how long-term that value is. And the cycle goes round and round where you see these upticks in, responsiveness and, communication, productivity, things like that. And then as soon as we leave, it tends to eventually go back to baseline. And that is just agitated me for the 20 years that I've been doing this and been looking for a solution. And what I wanted was something that the companies that I serve, the leaders that I serve, could actually use that sustains itself. So what we did was we built a company called Oxygen, and the goal of Oxygen is to develop organizations that breathe. So we come into companies and help them build what we call people development systems, and these systems sustain themselves so that people grow, leaders emerge at every level of the organization, and the organization over time gets stronger under its own power. So rather than renting from consultants or other leadership programs, they actually get to own this as an asset that increases in value over time.
So how is it you help organizations to build their own like leadership development infrastructure? Is
That's
that the
right.
idea here? Okay. Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Does it borrow from any other models or any other organizations that do this sort of work? And I don't mean borrow like you stole it, but I mean like is it, kind of brought together by anything you've seen anywhere else?
Yeah, so the systems that we've developed are proprietary, but part of the inspiration was, I mean, you guys know, you look around and you see global corporations like Nike, like Disney, Marriott, and they have these built-in leadership
Yeah.
development academies that if you or I get hired tomorrow, we walk in the door and the path is already laid out in front of us in terms of how we can grow, how we can develop, how we can ascend in the organization.
Right.
And we were looking around, we were like, well, why can't a small to medium-sized company do that? The answer is they can.
Yeah.
So we walk in, we partner with them, and we build that with them. And then eventually it becomes an asset that they own, that they can use for internal marketing, for external marketing to retain, attract, engage, ascend talent.
Nice. I love that.
Yep.
Yeah, fascinating, and I think such a need. And I'm excited to see where that goes. And this, I think, fits under your overall kind of, I don't want to put this under your overall aegis, so to speak. But one of the reasons that we were attracted to having this conversation is that you talk a lot about management, and you talk a lot about maybe some of the misconceptions or potentially even beyond misconceptions about that word. And that's one of the reasons that we started this podcast, is that we've seen the word management being utilized in a way that is not perhaps in the best interest of those who carry that title or those who respond to people with that title. You have a slightly different take, and I actually want to read something from a passage that you shared with us just the other day. And you wrote, "Management doesn't work. It's bad for people and bad for profit. It's the force undoing companies." That's a pretty spicy take. I'd love for you to tell us kind of what you mean as you wrote that.
Well, this was born of a realization that over the last 20 years, as I've worked with a number of incredible leaders and just seen them consistently hit their head against the ceiling, I started thinking, what is that thing that's holding them back? And that set in motion a deep dive on the history of management. And I won't bore your listeners with the details. Other than to say the whole term management, as we know it, is essentially a way of reducing people's performance, not increasing it. Which, if you're reducing people's performance, you're actually reducing profitability. And so, what it does grant organizations and companies in the form of a sense of control and predictability, it extracts freedom and ultimately prevents people from bringing their best to the organization. So that's essentially what I'm contesting, and that was, I'm just skipping right to the end of what I discovered as I went down this trail. We can unpack sort of how we've gotten there, but what I want to make clear is anyone listening to this, when I say management, what I mean, what I don't mean is the title management.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I don't. There are perhaps people listening to this right now who have manager on their card or on their title, who have a long, decorated history of bringing the people around them to life. They are people, as we would say, that are bringing oxygen to their workplace. Manager, they just inherited the title because that's a placeholder that we've inherited, from essentially the Industrial Revolution. And I'm also not referring to, that middle part of the org chart where it's managers. So those roles are important. Management, as I'm defining it, it's a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental conviction, and the conviction stems from the belief that I'm actually responsible for regulating my employees. That's my job. And so what do I do to try to regulate my employees, to try to manage my employees? Well, now that kicks in all sorts of different levers that I can use to try to get them to do what I want them to do. And I think there are well-meaning leaders. I know they're well-meaning leaders. I have several coming to mind right now that I've worked with who are managers, but they've defied a management mindset. It's anathema to them to think of trying to get their employees to do what they do. They actually have a very different mindset, which we can talk about, which I call de-envelopment. But that's probably enough. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts for now.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating, and I liked reading your stuff because, and I think it's provocative in the sense that I think we have a similar approach. I would argue the approach you take, and the way I read it anyway, is let's abolish. This is maybe going too far, and I don't think it's what you mean. It's like, let's abolish the idea of management. Like, let's abolish that term. Whereas I am like more, hey, let's not hide from it. Let's like talk about management, but really talk about it in a way of like what great management, what great leadership in that capacity can do. Because it's different than visionary leadership in my mind. And it has to be, because it like galvanizes groups of people toward a common entity, toward common good. And so I see it as more of like, what do we actually do to change that? Which I think what you're saying, except yours is more like, let's eliminate this altogether. It's too tarnished of a word, it's too tarnished of an idea, and there's something almost that has to be recreated. I don't know. So I'm interested to get you to reflect on that and to see if you think there's room for both, if it really matters, or how you've come to think about it in that way.
Yeah, and again, I'm really not hung up on the term management. I think I think it's probably with us for at least for the foreseeable future. When people say manager or management, they don't pour the meaning that I'm pouring into it. I'm really for abolishing the mindset, though. And it's predicated on the idea that there's a people profit ecosystem, that when people and profit live in a perfect tension, both win. And so what happens, though, is under management and with the mindset that we've inherited, we're actually capping that potential. And as I said earlier, by capping people, you're capping profitability. In contrast to that, what this rabbit trail I've taken for the last few months on management got me thinking, what's the opposite of management? So if we're going to displace or advocate for something other than a management mindset, what are we advocating for?
Yeah.
And I just assumed that the antithesis of management would be leadership. There's ways in which that might be true, but I actually went and I broke down the word. What does management mean? And in doing that unpacking on the etymology of management, it came out and I was like, actually, the opposite of management is development. But not development. Again, this is a term we just use all the time, but we don't know what it means. And I discovered it actually means the removing of layers of someone. So if you're developing someone, you are removing layers. It shares the same root word as envelope. So to develop someone is literally to de-envelop them.
Okay.
So that's the mission of what we're trying to do, is what can we do at every level within an organization to de-envelop people?
Yeah. Can I stick with that for a minute, and not to take over, Josh, but
No,
so
go
there's a
for it.
lot of, I think work. So I'm reading Multipliers right now as an example. I think about like the 15 Habits of Conscious Leadership, even a book by David Brooks called like How to Know a Person. I think these like those two books kind of give this idea. In Multipliers, it's called Multipliers or Diminishers. In David Brooks' work, it's called Illuminators or Diminishers, I think is what he calls them. So that idea of, I think, being the type of person that brings out the best in others, that makes them into developers of others is there. But why, if that literature's there, why are we still stuck in the negative way of how management unfolds? Why do you think it continues to perpetuate?
Uh, well, in some cases, it's because we've inherited it.
Yeah.
But I think it stems from the fact that, listen, okay, look, I was talking with a CFO the other day, and she was listing all the different assets within their company. And then she got done. She said, by four, what, tables, chairs, IT, the list goes on and on. She said, but obviously our most important asset is our people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the big difference between people and the rest of those assets is the rest of those assets typically do what you want, right? There's a high compliance factor that table is going to hold your computer when you set it down, right? That the HVAC system is going to work when you push the button. People are on an order of complexity that is so far exceeds any other asset. But we have come to expect a similar level of compliance and conformity, that they will do what we say and what we ask. And so part of it is just that assumption that we've inherited largely, I think, from the Industrial Revolution, which we can get into a little bit. But there's this assumption that people should do what I want. They're an extension of my will, just like my computer is an extension of my will. It's there to do what I want. So we've inherited that. And so anytime something is complex, what we're looking for is what can I use to try to understand and to regain some sense of control over that complex system? Because complexity triggers in us a lack of control. I can't control people.
Mm.
And so, during this process, I was thinking back to the Greeks and all of the mythology that they came up with to try to explain complex phenomena like the weather or how a war was going to turn out or something like that, right? And they came up with then, okay, there must be this system of gods. And what's helpful about that for them is, if I follow this prescription of sacrifice, or you name whatever the prescribed practice is, I will have some sense of control over this highly complex thing. It will rain and my crops will grow. Okay,
I
so
influence the outcome. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So then you take human beings, which I would argue are far more complex than the weather. And we have this sense of, oh my gosh, what do I do if I'm a manager? I'm overseeing 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, whatever it is. This is at an order of complexity that exceeds my sphere of control.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm in the market for a mythology that can give me the sense of control over that, if I subscribe to that management mindset. So that's essentially what I think is the appeal to us, is that it as a mythology, the management mindset, the management mythology plays upon my greatest fears, which are feeling out of control and not understanding something that's as complex as people.
Andrew, I think it would actually be helpful. I think we have the time for it, and I think the etymology, but also the history that you write about with the original term where management derived from, would help our listeners kind of see how the power of the language, the choice in that term itself, ties to this management mindset, this management mythology, if you will. Can you help our listeners understand
Yeah.
what you unpacked as you looked at the etymology and history of the word? I thought that was fascinating.
Oh, it blew my mind. And just to reiterate, I think probably people listening to your podcast, managers or otherwise, are listening because they are actually wanting to move beyond the management mindset. I mean, that's my operating assumption. So I think this could be helpful.
Yeah.
Uh, Essentially, management as we know it today was really an invention of a guy named Frederick Winslow Taylor. And he went through assembly lines in the early 20th century, and he used stopwatches, supervision, performance reviews, all these different things to essentially eliminate unnecessary movement along the assembly line. So if you unnecessary movement is what humans do. So if you remove unnecessary movement, you reduce human movement to essentially machine movement. So people would describe an assembly line after Taylor got done with it as a line of people that looked like marionette dolls, like puppets, but it was way more efficient, and he earned people like Ford. I mean, it's like 12x. I mean, the return was ridiculous. So if you can go back and look at that, it was like, oh my gosh, this Taylor's a
Yeah.
genius, right? But he didn't invent the concept. He actually borrowed the concept from an Italian horse training method. This actually started back in the 1560s, where horse trainers were like, how do we get horses to perform more like humans? So they would teach them to dance, to pirouette, but their methodology was oftentimes incredibly cruel. But they succeeded. The outcomes you couldn't argue with. The horses would dance in circles and do all these things for the entertainment of onlookers. And so it was interesting because, Taylor, essentially, I can picture him watching what ménager was the Italian word, what ménager brought to the horses, and he's like, wait, if ménager can train horses to act like humans, maybe it can train humans to act more like machines.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what he did. Now, obviously our economy's evolved over the last 120 years, like dramatically. So we've moved away from production in large part. Um, but the concept, because it's so appealing to have this sense of control, the concept is embedded within our economy today. And I would argue it is, as I'm working through this, I get these visions of like, what if our economy actually converted away from management? Do you have any idea how much talent that would unlock?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what that would mean for things like GDP? I mean, it's just incredible to think about. I mean, management is like this 1,000-pound gorilla that's holding our economy back one company at a time.
Mhm. Yep.
One of the, I mean, I think what's so fascinating about the work that, we're all digging into is that it's almost impossible to remove the psychosocial elements of the work of leadership. It can't just be
Hmm.
the the methodology that, as you kind of described, happening 100 years ago, but we're, I think, still just like everything in life, things change more slowly than they probably need to. What I'm picturing in this paradigm, it feels like there's a lot about, it's maybe not the right analogy, and I'd like to get both of your responses, but almost like that rescuer victim sort of approach, or over functioning, under functioning sort of dynamic of like, it is my responsibility as the manager to make sure that you know exactly what it is that you need to do. And I am in charge of how you end up performing and doing what it is we need you to do, as opposed to saying like the true ability to unlock capacity is about me taking a slightly different role. Yes, I am responsible to making sure that you perform, but the way in which that happens isn't by me kind of pouring the proverbial pitcher of knowledge into your head and, essentially ensuring compliance. But it's, I think you mentioned this, I like to hear more about the concept, but like peeling back layers of their onion, helping them to
Yeah.
pull back what is getting in the way and unlocking the capacity within them, as opposed to learning the capacity that you, the manager, are requiring of them. And I think I don't know if I'm articulating it with the level of concision that you did, Andrew, but I think that led to another term you threw out a few minutes ago, and maybe that's where we go next. But what are you thinking related to the psychosocial components of this and human control, et cetera?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. Taylor literally said that his methods are directly antagonistic, and he called it this old idea that each workman can best regulate his own way of doing the work. I mean, think about that. So his whole method is predicated on the manager taking responsibility for the employee, right? So the alternative to that, the manager asks, how can I get my employee to do what I want, and what sort of levers can I use to create some predictable outcomes? Um, the developer, the de-enveloper,
Yeah.
asks, what conditions can I put in place? So it goes without saying for the developer that my employee is actually responsible for his or her own choices, behavior. They're the ones. I'm not responsible for that. What I am responsible for is putting the right conditions in place that bring out their best. And that can include structure, that can include accountability, that can include incentives. But your job is to put in place the structure, right? The conditions. Now, if those conditions don't work, one of a few things is true. Either you have some growth to do as a manager in terms of, you didn't necessarily put the right conditions in place. So you have to go to work thinking, what would bring out the best in this person? Or that person's not the right fit. So,
Right.
that I can't tell you. I mean, you guys run into it where we've been for 3 years, trying to get this person to just to do their job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, maybe they're not the right fit, or maybe the conditions aren't right. Let's look at both, and then let's try to move towards some sort of decision point.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, in that case too, I think sometimes as you're talking, I'm like, this all sounds great, but what if I just don't get the people that when I give them the chance to unlock it to the way they want? I think, but I think in reality, what happens in situations where the manager does a good job of this is, the great people stick around, they stay, they perform higher, they give you better outcomes because they're tapping into it. Um, and actually the number of people, there's actually a really optimistic view of humans here. Like most people are going to rise to the
yes.
occasion because they're given the idea of it. Whereas those who don't, we can let them go, but we're not going to have to let go of 50% of our people or 75% of our people because none of them can get to where they want. Because it's not about meeting my expectations. It's about people maximizing their infinite potential. And if I believe in that, then I'm not worried about what happens if I have to fire everyone. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's it. I
Yeah.
love what you said. Like, a management mindset has a diminished view of human capacity.
Mhm.
Whereas the developer, rather than seeing human unpredictability as a liability, they see it as an asset. And they want to put those conditions in place that channel and bring out the best in those people.
Yeah.
For example, I was just had a meeting with a CEO yesterday, and we were talking about setting up the what, and this is part of the conditions. Leaders need to be crystal clear about like, this is the end point. This is what we're all moving toward. This is your role in that. That's the destination, but I'm going to give you the structure to figure out how we get there. I'm not going to hold your hand through that. In many ways, you're probably smarter than I am on how we get there. But what we see so often is we see leaders that actually step into and disrupt the process of letting people go about it the way that they would naturally go about it. I see that a lot, like in the trades and things like that. But
Yeah.
This sparked for me something that I've been really thinking a lot about, which is this critical moment in history with the disruption of artificial intelligence, which is getting way better at processing processual knowledge, procedural knowledge than the human brain in many cases.
yeah,
I wonder what the intersection you see here is between what you're talking about, Andrew, with this development mindset, unlocking the capacity of those who you are developing, as opposed to thinking of it as like managing.
Yeah. Or
What do you
training.
see the intersection being in the opportunity space? I see it as a potential opportunity space with this paradigm that you're speaking to here and this critical juncture we're experiencing in history.
oh man, how much longer do we have?
Yeah.
I mean, this
We
is
we
it.
can go a little bit more for sure.
Dude,
Yeah, but I think
this
that's yeah.
this is it. This opportunity is I don't even think it's generational. I think it's like, I mean, I don't know if we'll see another opportunity like this, because what's happening is we are inheriting a system that trains people to be more like machines, but now we have AI, which will out machine any human any day. So what's left? We need to be less machine-like and more human-like.
Mm-hmm.
And the companies that lead that, the organizations that lead that charge are going to be the ones in 3 to 5 years that have so outpaced the others that are still clinging to a management mindset.
I wonder, think this is pretty big picture. It's pretty like 30,000 feet. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more of you, and maybe this is where you tie into oxygen a little bit is, yeah. So what does something like what oxygen puts in place at companies, what does it do to unlock that mindset? Like, what does this look like on a practical level? Um, if you can talk us through a little bit without giving away your trade secrets, a little bit of like what that looks like that people can adopt and transform. A second part to that is what does it mean for the internal work of managers themselves? It's not just a system. It's obviously about internal work of the people running these development programs or these development ideas, right?
Right, right. I think we we begin with the individual unit and we go, okay, what does a human being need to flourish?
Mm.
And so we've looked at a lot of the research, the Global Flourishing Project out of Harvard, if you're familiar with that.
Hmm.
And they've studied, I think it's 23 countries around the world, and they've isolated 6 different conditions that are necessary for human flourishing. And so we have actually an entire assessment that we use to figure out what their holistic flourishing is. And then we also have a work specific flourishing index. So what we want to know is that will give us some sense of their oxygen level. How well are they breathing? How well are they doing? So if someone is flourishing, then the question is, like, if you think about a cell, you want a cell to flourish, you want it to be healthy. Well, that cell has what it takes to flourish, it's naturally going to grow. And so then what we talk about is how does that healthy cell that's flourishing actually grow? So um, then we take it to like a team level. If you have 10 people on a team who are flourishing, what do they need to then grow, to multiply themselves? So we've done pretty extensive research on whether it's business leaders, coaches, all sorts of different sectors. What are the qualities and the skills that these people possess? That that's key. So when we're actually helping them build this asset that they will own, we've identified these 7 qualities that we cultivate. Things like courage or humility or, patience, things like that, right?
Yeah.
You have to have that in place. Those things you don't learn those through a workshop. Like you can't, I mean, you can go through a courage workshop and you're going to come out the other side and you're going to be pretty inspired about that, but that doesn't make you courageous. Life's going to teach you courage. So these qualities are things that life teaches us. There are skills, however, that we can practice and get better at. Things like deep listening or reflective listening, being able to practice like authentic curiosity in people, so that we actually can help build those skills. So those are the kinds of things that we looked at the research. This is what's true across the board of people that develop other people. And we are going to implement and bake these skills and practices and qualities into this asset that we hand over to our clients.
Well, and to your point, the thing that makes, because I read a lot of your reading, it's like, hey, going to the workshop doesn't work. Going to the
Yeah.
series doesn't work. And I get that from like a provocative standpoint, but I'm also hearing what you're saying is like, look, I think people need that vocab. They need that understanding. Like, for example, deep listening for some folks, until you hear the term deep listening, you can't then to begin to develop like what it means to do that well. Right. I mean, you
That's
can,
right.
but like, so it's okay to get that. But what you're saying is like, unless it's integrated into the workplace itself, like sending people off to do this and then assuming they'll come back and be good doesn't work unless the workplace itself builds off of what they learned. So it's more of like that integration into what you're doing and making sure it connects.
You nailed it, John.
Would that be right? I mean, because you read
Totally.
your stuff and it's like, oh, he says don't go to workshops anymore. But what I'm hearing you say is that's fine, but only if it's then extended into and actually perpetuated at the workplace. Does that
Yeah.
seem right? Okay.
Yeah. And so it has to help. Every single person we work with has live and present pain points. this has to address those pain
Yeah.
points. This can't be some abstract, ethereal concept. So we actually help them come in and we apply it to their live issues so that they see the power of it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Andrew, and as we kind of move towards wrapping this particular episode, and honestly, like to your point, we could probably do this for hours and we could love to have you back. What questions would you or do you encourage executive leaders, CEOs, operators of, these businesses? What questions should people be asking themselves right now that could potentially illuminate the need to rethink the paradigm? Like when you sit down with an executive, what questions are you asking them, or are they even asking you, that signal this potential willingness to shift towards a reconsideration of their model? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, probably the most powerful question that we ask is, "What do you want?" And it often leads to a fairly exploratory conversation about what do you actually want. And that conversation is going to go one of several directions, but in the end, it's going to give us an indication of whether an organization's a good fit or not. And, what we're looking for is, do we see those indications that when that person, at a level that they're not even aware of, is so deeply committed to people growing under their leadership, that's what we're looking for. Because we can't talk someone into that. That either is there or it's not. And typically what we hear from them is like, man, I am so tired of paying for programs that like just disappear.
Yeah.
I do not want to lose another high performer because they outgrew us. We didn't have a place for them to go.
Mhm.
I need people ready when bigger roles open up. And for a lot of them, it's like, I wish like this whole leadership development didn't fall on me. I wish there was something that I could build that would do this. And that's what we're looking for. And those are the signs for me that it's like, okay, this could be a really good fit for Oxygen.
Josh, do I have time for one more question before we do the last question?
I
Is
think
that
we have time for your
okay?
question. I'd like to then pass it to Andrew for just anything that you
Yeah.
wish we asked you about, and then we'll close.
Andrew, you said earlier, hey, if people are listening to this podcast, they're probably interested in like understanding a better approach to this type of leadership or management, right? And I think we agree with that. That's why we hope people are listening to it. What would you say to encourage those folks? Like they're sitting in their role, and let's even say they're in a situation where the organization itself hasn't defined management in the way it should be, or they haven't helped to create the conditions. But what can they start doing today? How would you encourage them to take a step forward in more of like helping people be better humans and untapping their infinite potential?
Yeah, this is a great question. In terms of them being a vehicle for development, I would ask them to look at the list of the people that they lead right now, and I would ask one question: how well do I get these people?
Mhm.
Because there's someone on that list that it's like, I do not get this person, or they're difficult. My next question is, do the people on the list get that you get them? So in order for you to open up the opportunity to de-envelop them, they have to get that you get them. First, you have to get them. Do you understand them? Or are you too busy? Things too frenetic? Or do they sense that you get them? Then you need to let them know that you get them. And then I call it getting gotten. They will get that you get them. That's the bedrock foundation. Like, think about anyone that we trust. We get that they get us, and that opens up all kinds of opportunities for development. So managers that are out there that want to open up new levels of development with their people, that's a great exercise. And then the question is, what can you do to help them get that you get them? And that can look different for each person. So yeah, that would be my admonition.
We like a framework on here, and that sounds like it could be titled the Get After Getting Them, Get Them framework. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
that's good.
Andrew, is there anything that we didn't ask you about today, or a thought that you had that moved past before you could address it, just to kind of give you a chance at the final word here.
Yeah, final word would be, and it's something that actually I would encourage even before the getting gotten exercise, um, is to do some personal reflection on where the individual is at in terms of their own leadership. I'm a huge fan of a book called Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman, and he boils leadership down to really presence. It's what we would call oxygen. And we all know people that help us breathe better. We breathe better around them. Um, that's what I'm talking about. So he gets into the work for every single one of us, the three of us on this conversation, everyone listening. The work is, how do I become a self-differentiated person who can manage my own anxiety in order to bring presence to the people I lead? But that begins with me.
Awesome.
I love that. One quick reaction to that. If you've ever listened to the poet David Whyte, beautiful poet. He's an Irish, I would imagine, future poet laureate. He has a poem called Time, and he says that it's an extended essay, really. And he talks about that in the universe, time slows down as it moves closer to some objects of heavy mass, like a black hole. And he analogizes that to the mass in our own lives is presence. And as we are more present, time slows down. And I think that's a beautiful analogy to kind of hit on the value of being present for those that you're serving in the capacity of a coach, capacity as a manager, capacity as a leader. So check out David Whyte's poem called Time. We're going to turn it to you for a final question, Andrew. Who is a leader that has inspired you? And briefly, why?
Hmm. Yeah, the leader that inspires me is my mentor, a guy named Larry. He's been my mentor for about 20 years. And when you think about the idea of emotional resonance, or what I call getting gotten, he is someone that people just magnetically draw toward because he has presence. He has done and continues to do the necessary work to have presence. I owe a debt of gratitude I will never pay, other than paying it forward to him, to the contribution in my life. He is the most humble, unassuming individual that yet has just an enormous impact on many, many people, myself included.
Well, Andrew, we're thankful for Larry because he has helped make you who you are, who's so thoughtful about these ideas and is bringing it to us and our audience. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for being part of this. I'm definitely carrying forward this idea of de-envelopment and presence as I go into this week. So again, I want to thank Andrew for being here. Please check out his work. Lots of great stuff, lots of great ideas. And until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.